Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches English Language and Literature A-Level. This video is the first of a series taking you through the Edexcel Voices in Speech and Writing anthology, otherwise known as the Parrot book, because it has a parrot on the front. So we're going to be looking at the first text today, Charlie Brooker, Too Much Talk for One Planet, Why I'm Reducing My Word Emissions. I'm going to take you through content, context and gap first of all, and then we'll have a little look at some key quotes and try and consider what voice is being created and how his experience is being presented through the literary and linguistic devices. So hopefully very helpful for your revision. Let's get started. Okay, so let's just start off with a quick recap about what this article is about. This is an article written by Charlie Brooker where he's talking about the sort of dangers of online communication and social media, and he starts by explaining why he has stopped writing his usual column with a little anecdote about whether or not he had asked for particular comments to be turned off underneath the article, but it then turns into an article that is really focusing on how and why people are able to communicate in the way that they do and how kind of dangerous that is. In terms of context, things that you need to know. Charlie Brooker is a writer, he's a producer, he's a presenter. Most importantly, he is a satirist. Okay, you might recognize him because he is the person that has created Black Mirror, which is currently on Netflix. In case you're not sure about what satire is a way of criticizing normally aspects of society and usually through humor. So it can be satire can be created through exaggeration, overgeneralization, incongruity, and inversion, various other things. But basically, it's using humor but to criticize an aspect of society. Other contextual factors to consider is the rising numbers of social media users and platforms, and how that has led to the trolling sensation is worth considering. You'll want to realise that Charlie Brooker is a regular writer for The Guardian, which is why the article starts with him saying, oh, you might have noticed I haven't been doing my usual piece. And then the other form that is mentioned is The Private Eye, which is a satirical magazine run by Ian Hislop, magazine and online, and so that's where this kind of anecdote of Charlie Brooker supposedly wanting the comments to be taken off comes from. If we want to think about gap, genre, audience, purpose, always important when starting with these parrot texts. So obviously it's an article, but more specifically, it's an opinion piece, okay? So Brooker has a column where as long as the viewpoints that he presents are in line with the viewpoint of The Guardian, he is able to express his opinion. So it's different from a news report. So we're obviously looking at a public audience here. Yes, Guardian readers, who are they? Well, they're going to be people who are politically on the left. They're going to be educated reasonably. Adult, but you're also going to get the people that specifically tune in to Brooker himself and people that enjoy satire, because he's got quite a definitive style. You can tell a Brooker piece a mile off. And what's the purpose? Well, of course it is to entertain. He's employed. Yeah, The Guardian want to sell newspapers. So yes, it's to entertain, but it is certainly to inform, and it's about expressing those opinions about the harmful effects of social media and communication. So to a degree, there is persuasion in there as well. Okay, so this next part of the presentation, I am going to give you some key quotations with a focus on, well, hang on, what is the voice? And then start thinking about some of the literary and linguistic devices within the writing. When it comes to voice, it's such a strange thing. Just think to yourself, how does he sound? Yeah, how does he sound? If you can find some adjectives to describe how does he sound, you're talking about his voice. So most important things here are he's quite confrontational, he's certainly very satirical and sardonic, he's quite sarcastic, all in line with the kind of idea of humorous. He's very conversational indeed. It's a very informal style of writing. There's a lot of direct address. So On each slide, I've given you a couple of sort of descriptive words that you could use to describe voice. Some of them are quite different because depending on how you take the quote. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm saying that within the headline and the pull quote that's used as a tagline, you can say that he's been quite reflective, he's been quite self-aware in his voice. It sounds quite reflective, sounds quite self-aware. So let's start with the headline, Too Much Talk for One Planet, Why I'm Reducing My Word Emissions. One of the things I want to draw your attention to is this use of juxtaposition, because what we do is we start with the broad, with the big, with the general, okay? One planet, too much talk. Note it's about volume. There's too much talk for one planet. Note how kind of vague that is. On to why I'm reducing my word emissions. So we've got this shift from the broad, from the general to the specific first person pronoun I, which suggests that Brooker is conscious not only of the big issues, but also what the individual can do. So that's where we get this idea about being self-aware. He's willing to point out what he has been doing wrong as well. Most important thing here is that this is the start of an extended metaphor, that communication, particularly online communication, can be seen as a form of pollution, as global warming. So it starts here with this metaphor of word emissions. You get a little bit of it again in that pull quote. So I'm saying pull quote because it's taken from later on in the article. So if you were using this, you might look at it in the context of the headline, but you might look at it in the context of the paragraph that it comes from. Okay, so yeah, vast cloud is an extension of this idea of pollution here. But we also have these wonderful nouns, jabber and blah. So deliberately vague language. Blah is also associated with kind of teen speak that might be telling us something about the rise of social media in young people. Jabber, you might think of the Jabberwocky. So it's quite a nice, interesting allusion to the sort of idea of the made-up word, the kind of nonsense word. And he's saying that is what is sort of filling our world, this sort of meaningless jabber. So the premise is really, really set from the headline and the pull quote. Next aspect of voice, the self-deprecating tone he uses. Now, this is all the way through, it's everywhere. And again, we've got the idea about it being quite conversational. Again, you can use so many different quotes, but I thought I'd start this one off. This is the actual opening paragraph. So I've said quote, it's a big old chunk. But I thought I'd just draw your attention to a couple of things. So first off, we've got this sort of assumed like knowledge, this shared knowledge between Brooker and his readership. So when he talks about a paragraph in the private eye claimed I'd asked Alan Rusbridger, editor of The Guardian, we do get this little bit in parenthesis, just in case anybody didn't know who Alan Rusbridger is, to switch off the reader comments. So there is this kind of assumed knowledge that his readers will know what the private eye is, will understand that dynamic, that this is another kind of satirical paper. It tells us something about the readership. So yeah, to switch off the reader comments underneath my articles, not true, and that he'd refuse to do so, also not true, and so I'd quit. Not entirely true. So this is a lovely little bit of crafting, very, very conversational, light-hearted in tone, and really this comes from this series of parentheses. Look, we've got 3 little lots of parentheses where the adjectival phrases within are repeated, but just with slight variations. So it creates a bit of humour. It's about the idea about what is real and what is not real, which I think this article is about as well, sort of clearing things up. But again, it creates a sense of like this conversational tone with the reader. And then we've got more humour here, more self-deprecation when he says this led to an intense flurry of activity. So we get a little bit of hyperbole here, certainly in the adjective intense. Flurry suggests like frenzy and panic. And then he immediately juxtaposes it by saying, by which I mean 4 people asked me about it. Okay, so again, there's something overly specific here in this number 4, which creates a bit of humour. But the self-deprecation also comes from the sense of bathos, which also means like anticlimax. So you're like, oh, how many people got upset? Oh, 4. So very, very Brooker in style. But again, this is setting up the premise, like it's the story behind the article, like what has got him thinking about word count, you know, how much people are putting out there. Love this one. So this is one of our first ones where we start to see him being very direct, edging into confrontational. Now, he's not trying to upset his audience. Sometimes people get a bit confused about his confrontational style, but this is a kind of Brookerism. Like, you know, he can get away with this, whereas not all writers would be able to. So he starts off, incidentally, so note that adverb again creates that conversational tone, little discourse marker. I'm aware this is Olympic level navel gazing, but you're a human being. So we've got this wonderful hyperbole and metaphor. Olympic level, okay, like he's trained in it, navel gazing, looking inward. So definitely self-deprecating again here. He's talking about the idea that he's being quite self-absorbed in his musings. And then we get this direct address. But you're a human being with free will who can stop reading at any time. Here, have a full stop. So definitely very direct. It's not just the direct address, it's the use of imperatives, and it's the idea that he's gifting a full stop. And each full stop becomes representative of an opportunity to walk away, to go. And then look at this. He gives us three full stops and another. And another. So he's really playing around here, using these minor sentences just to say, go on, off you trot, off you trot. There are exits all over this building. Lovely metaphor here. So now the article itself is a building and every full stop is an exit that a person can walk out of. Now this metaphor is extended because, and I've just given it to you here, the very last line of the article is now get out. So again, coming back to the idea that it's a building that you can walk away from. So quite confrontational, but it's more about giving the reader that kind of sense of what they can do rather than upsetting them or annoying them. Okay, another little bit of self-awareness, certainly self-deprecation as always, but you get this quite critical tone here in his voice. So he's just been talking about the idea of people making mistakes and then memes being sent all around until there are sort of however many billions of jokes being made online. So we have events and noise, events and noise. Everything was starting to resemble nothing but events and noise. So lovely bit of repetition here. So we've got repetition of this noun phrase, events and noise, but then we've got a form of repetition called anadiplosis here, where it's repeated again at the end. So you get this almost cyclical, ongoing, events, noise, it never stops. So by having it at the beginning and at the end, anadiplosis, it emphasizes just how much noise there is. We've got some lovely vague language as well here with the everything was starting to resemble. So it all being sort of overwhelming, that like no escape from it at all. Got a lovely extended metaphor. You could talk about it in terms of semantic fields. It would work here, which is a semantic field of war. So firing more words. So we've got firing into the middle of all that began to strike me as futile and unnecessary. Obviously, futile and unnecessary are adjectives that are often used to describe war, futility of war. So suddenly this online communication is now like a battleground. Again, it's emphasizing how dangerous it is. And then for more self-awareness, I started to view myself as yet another factory mindlessly pumping carbon dioxide into a toxic sky. So wonderful extended metaphor there, extension from the opening headline and the pull quote, but just look at it in detail. So we've got this yet another factory. So this determiner here reminding us of just how many people there are contributing to this issue. I like this adverb as well, mindlessly, the kind of sense that people are sort of oblivious to what they're doing. Pumping carbon dioxide into a toxic sky, great adjective there again, reminding us of the whole kind of concept of pollution, but also toxic is a word that we use quite a lot nowadays to mean sort of cruelly harmful, like the kind of corrupted version of self. So the fact that it's a toxic sky is perhaps referring to that sort of meanness, that cruelty that you see online. Brilliant bit of satirical writing, and largely because of the incongruity You can say incongruity as a noun, or that you can say that it is incongruous as an adjective, which is a form of satire, which is about things being sort of completely out of place to the point of being sort of slightly ridiculous. So talking about himself, a bit more self-deprecation. I'm an elderly man from the age of steam, lovely hyperbole here, who clings irrationally to the outmoded belief that articles and letter pages should be kept separate, just like church and state. So again, we've got that assumed knowledge here. He's harking back to a time where when people read something in a newspaper, they would write a letter in response, and that would then get published if it was selected in another part of the paper. So he's demonstrating the kind of difference, the different ways now of communicating, and that's what he clings to. He wishes it was still like that. So a little bit of contextual understanding there. So now I'm sitting grumpily in a spaceship with my arms folded, wearing a stovepipe hat. That's like a top hat. Ridiculous. So this metaphor is really quite incongruous, the idea of him on a spaceship. It's a lot of hyperbole. It's so over the top, demonstrating that he sees himself as completely out of the loop now as this elderly man. And then we get this little minor sentence at the end. Ridiculous. So yes, he's poking fun of himself. He's poking fun of the fact that he's not rolling with the times in those ways. Okay, we've got a brilliant bit of kind of critical tone here where he starts to parody the voice of the trolls on the internet. So this is really worthwhile commenting on. He says, I get an incredibly easy ride from passing well-wishers compared with any woman who dares write anything on the internet anywhere about anything at all. The ugly bitch, boo, go home, bitch, go home. This is absolutely brilliant. Okay, so first off, we've got this vague language here with, you know, anything, anywhere, anything, nice bit of repetition there to suggest it doesn't matter what a woman is writing. Content is meaningless, it's irrelevant, it's the fact that it's a woman writing. And then this lovely verb here, who dares write anything. So he's obviously creating quite an ironic tone there, suggesting, oh, the audacity of a woman who's going to dare to write something. And then here we have non-standard forms where he mimics the voice of the online troll. So in mimicking that voice, we've got taboo language or profanity. So traditional insult for a woman, the ugly bitch, appearances, and profanity that is specific to female gender. We've got use of imperatives, non-standard forms of punctuation. Note that the punctuation just completely goes away because it's meant to literally be mimicking the typos and the mistakes of the person, the keyboard warrior at home writing abuse. So you can bring in a little bit of context there as well, but that's a lovely bit to analyse. Last little bit before I leave you to it. So this is the end of the article. So the penultimate paragraph, because the last paragraph is obviously just a little one sentence job. We get this really nice kind of cyclical structure where we come back to the imagery that we had at the beginning. In other words, I'm reducing my carbon emissions. So we've got that extended metaphor once more. Back to the kind of notion of emissions. So really nice and cohesive as an end. And then we get this really kind of wonderful sarcasm where he continues making fun of himself, but also the situation by explaining what a newspaper is. So you've got lots of lovely specific details. It contains words and pictures. It captures fire easily. Excuse me. So nice and sarcastic, but then the very, very, very final sentence of the piece, now get out, lovely imperative, and again it's that extended metaphor from the article as being a newspaper. So good way to end it. That's it from me. I know I didn't go through absolutely everything. It is quite a long article, so I just chose a few little interesting bits that hopefully will help you kind of marry up voice and analysis. If there are any parts of the article that you'd like any help with, just drop me a line in the comments and I will come back to you. Otherwise, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'm going to be loading more of these para anthology book texts in the next couple of weeks to help you with your revision. Thanks again. Happy revising.